Hi everyone, it's Gabrielle Tamont with the College Fix. Censorship and viewpoint discrimination have become a huge issue on college campuses around the country. Today we spoke with a former professor who's facing what many conservative faculty experience on campus. He says he was fired for advocating for some pretty mainstream opinions on gender ideology and parental rights. We spoke with him and his lawyer at length about the case. Here it is. Thank you both so much for joining us. Just to make things easier for our listeners, I'll refer to you guys as Professor Dan and Lawyer Dan, if that's okay.
That
Okay,
works.
so starting with Professor Dan, for anyone who isn't familiar with your story, can you start by telling us what happened from your perspective leading up to your termination at the U of A?
Sure, I'd love to. Yeah, it was around 2019 when my department hired me at the University of Arizona. It was the School of Government and Public Policy, still is the School of Government and Public Policy. Uh, Fast forward that to, I'd say, the fall of 2023, when I was considering a textbook uh, deal with a publisher. And that's because I didn't think there was an appropriate textbook out there for this topic. It's a neglected topic, believe it or not, for government ethics to have a good resource out there. And so I thought I would have an opportunity to be able to put something out there. I was approached by a publisher and was coming back to them with some basic questions about the department. How many students are taking this class? Are there other professors who we want to collaborate? Basic administrative questions about the department that the publisher had for me. And I had asked one of my contacts at the department that I normally went to for this kind of thing, this question, which should be a quick and easy answer. But the response was, let me set you up on a Zoom with our dean. She'd like to talk to you. So I was a little taken aback by that, but I was welcome to do it. Hadn't even spoken to her before, and so this was an opportunity I was fine with. But as soon as we got on the Zoom, I sensed something was amiss. She started complimenting me about how great the things I was doing for the students, how much they appreciated my work in the department and the support that I gave. But she said, they're not going to be renewing my contract. And the reason she gave was that she was generously endowed with extra funding by a very charitable dean who was willing to shower them with funds enough to hire 3 full-time tenure track faculty professors. And so I was, what can I say if somebody with a higher credential comes in, so be it. Only problem is that's not how it turned out to be.
Wow,
I
okay.
was given a lie. It was under false pretenses.
And how do you think that textbook deal played a role in your termination?
I don't think so. I think it's part
Okay.
of the story that led me to this conversation with the director of the department. And the director just took this as an opportunity to share with me what they had been in the works for a while. And I know what their reasoning was because I submitted a public records request
Yeah.
immediately after this because it was just a bizarre conversation. It didn't add up. And so, having worked as a parents' rights advocate, which is kind of part of the story, I knew how you submit a public records request, the duty of the government to respond to that, and how the process works. Or at least I thought I did until I saw how they were really delaying things, and to such an extent that I set a monthly reminder on my phone to send another email to U of A, University of Arizona, saying, what's the status? Has this been rejected? Has my request been denied? All I asked for was an email with any mention of my name, and it didn't seem to be that big of a request. So I enlisted the help of Goldwater, another law firm that was helpful to be able to get me some those records. They compelled U of A to get records. They came in maybe 2 hours after the deadline we gave them with thousands and thousands of pages of emails, much more than I expected. But it was very enlightening because I was able to see within this stack of documents, I was able to see 3 anonymous letters from people related to that parents' rights advocacy that I was mentioning earlier, people who took another position than me, and making false allegations. I would suggest mischaracterizing my religious beliefs and my moral point of view, saying things like he's leading this anti-gay, bigoted, transphobic organization, when in reality I was using my Christian worldview to support parents and parents' rights in our school district. So they didn't mention anything about this. They never asked me about it, but I see behind the scenes some chatter about it and how it was an issue that they needed to address, and they addressed it in that Zoom by getting rid of me.
So you're essentially alleging that those anonymous complaints influenced the school to let go of you. Is that right?
Yes, yes, and I know that.
Okay. Okay. And you also, I think, mentioned previously, you talked about your kind of professional loss because of this and personal impact that it's had on you. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's really impacted my whole career ambition. As in law enforcement, I have the benefit of being able to retire after 20 years, and that puts me pretty young. I mean, I'm 8, 9 months away right now from doing that, and I don't see myself in a rocking chair. I see myself as launching into a new career, and I had thought that that would be in academics. I really have a passion for ethics. I have ever since my graduate school when I graduated Biola in 2008. I wanted to pursue something in ethics, and I was hoping to apply for either studying ethics through the public administration college or through philosophy, actually in the same college, but in a different department. And that's certainly been tainted by my feeling compelled to act for seeking justice in this case. And the textbook deal would be just another one example. That was never allowed to get off the ground because even the most basic questions that I had to ask, I wasn't given answers to. And not being in the department obviously is going to impact the need for being involved in the textbook deal. So those two things were pretty detrimental to me. And so that's, on top of any lost salary or income.
Was there anything in particular that you had said or that your organization was advocating for that those people were taking an issue with, that the school was taking an issue with?
I think the where we touched a nerve was on the transgender ideology that we were taking issue with, and we didn't address it directly. There's no need to invoke a controversy when it's not necessary. So my approach was for parental rights, and specifically, what the school is doing is they, like some other districts across our country that we've been seeing, have been allowing a social transition of a gender identity without informing the parents or intentionally keeping the parents out of it.
Yeah.
And my argument was those kids deserve parental involvement just like, or maybe even more so than my own kids and other kids. So that was my heartfelt concern. And as a parent of two kids in that school district, I also had to ask myself, well, gee, my kids may not be struggling with this right now. But what if it's some other issue? How can I trust a district if they're not going to tell me about a serious condition like this? Something that no matter what your perspective, it's a serious issue, right? We have different perspectives on what that really means and the moral angles, but it's still a big deal. And to leave parents out of that seems to me that you are opening the door to a lot more when your principle is excluding parents. So
Yeah.
that was the issue. That was the touchy one, and it was contorted into an anti-trans or anti-gay perspective, perhaps because that was more inflammatory in their accusations against me. I can't read their minds, but that was the accusation, and I didn't make those allegations, and I didn't address transgenderism or homosexuality or any of these sexual ethics head on. So it was a mischaracterization of what I was trying to do. But both of them were attack, I think, or a criticism rather of my Christian worldview.
Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and advocating for your own free speech. I wanted to transition now to lawyer Dan. What do you think about your odds of winning this case?
It's difficult to read the tea leaves in law, but the law is pretty clear.
Mm-hmm.
Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, the First Amendment, because this is a government actor, says you're not permitted to fire someone for going before a public body and expressing their viewpoint and their speech and their religious exercise. That's what Professor Grossenbach did here. He's a citizen just like you and I and just like everybody else. He has the right to petition his government, and that's what he did. He went to the Catalina Foothills School District and advocated for his children and for other students in the district and said, I don't like what the school board is doing. I don't like the policies. I don't like the practices. I'm a parent. I have the fundamental right to direct the upbringing and education of my children, and I'm going to. He went before the public body peacefully, and as he is permitted to do. And there were individuals at the university, in the administration, and others who didn't like what he had to say. Well, you're not permitted to fire someone for that. That's what the First Amendment calls a heckler's veto. Listener reaction to speech isn't a basis to shut it down. And under the Civil Rights Act, it's not a basis to fire someone. The targeting of Professor Grossenbach for his religious views that he expressed in the public arena before a public body is unlawful. It's unconstitutional and it's unconscionable. The university system historically was the marketplace of ideas. We want, of all people, an ethics professor to perhaps teach and live his life in accordance with ethical principles. That's what Professor Grossenbach was doing. Not only was he teaching his students Nicomachean ethics and Aristotle and Plato and all the other things that were in the curriculum, he was living it out. Can't we all agree that a sexual preference survey provided to elementary school children is inappropriate? And that's all he was saying. And that's what he was fired for. And the law prohibits that.
So where does the case currently stand? What are next steps? And do you have an estimated timeline for how long it might take?
We have filed the complaint, which is the initiation of a lawsuit in the United States District Court for the District of Arizona. The state and, the State Board of Regents and the university and the various defendants owe a response in court, either to answer the complaint or to file some kind of motion related to it. Next week, we should hear something as to what the position of the school is, and then we'll either have some motion practice where there'll be a hearing, or they'll answer it and we'll go into discovery. And for your audience, discovery is the process of, we ask questions, we take depositions, we gather the facts to prove that the university engaged in unlawful discrimination. And the stuff we have attached to the complaint and the documents we already have pretty clearly prove that. But it's just the process, we have to walk through it.
I wanted to finish with a question that's not directly related to this case, but I think it's relevant to the free speech conversation we're having today. So since Charlie Kirk was assassinated, there has been an uptick in what some may call cancellations from the right. There's been a lot of professors fired for celebrating his assassination. Do you think that those are justified?
It's a fine line, to be sure. And make no mistake, since you brought it up, what happened to Professor Grossenbach is step one in the process that leads to putting a bullet in somebody's neck. Yes. Canceling somebody and firing them because you don't like what they had to say is the first step towards ultimate silencing. You basically accept and normalize the type of behavior and actions that were taken towards Professor Grossenbach, and the next step is more harsh, and the next step is more harsh, and you have people who have lost their minds who are willing to put a bullet in the mouth, in the neck of somebody who was just trying to speak. The irony there is significant. But more directly to your question, there is a distinction between what Professor Grossenbach did and what some of these professors have done. Historically, there are excluded categories of speech. There's not many, there's 5, and one of them is incitement to violence. The others are not really relevant. You can't defame somebody, you can't spread fraud, and some of the other, there's other categories, obscenity, what have you. But in one of them, if you're inciting others to violence, and without speaking to various instances of them, I think some, and there have been some court cases on this already, some just expressed a viewpoint that they didn't like what Charlie Kirk had to say. It wasn't that, I think it's great that he should have gotten killed. I think, who's next? There were some examples of professors who were like, okay, do Ben Shapiro next. Do Trump next. That perhaps crosses the line. And that it's an open question. That's what courts are for. I happen to be a First Amendment absolutist. I think the answer to speech you don't like is more speech. You don't silence the person who has a viewpoint you don't like. You go out and do what Charlie Kirk tried to do and debate them and engage in the marketplace of ideas and say, you're wrong, I have a better idea, let me prove it to you.
Yeah.
But in
Yeah.
some of these instances where professors have come out and said, okay, no, we need more of this. You got to do this. You got to do this. Well, let's have Ben Shapiro next or whoever the target du jour is. And they go after them. That is probably crossing the line and would give the government the authority to probably terminate someone. Some of the other ones where I don't like him, and that probably crossed the line. They probably violated the First Amendment, and they're probably going to be held to account for it the way the University of Arizona is going to be held to account for doing what they did to Professor Grossenbach. So it's a fine line, and I get that it's nuanced, and it's difficult to kind of parse that out without seeing exactly the phrase that was uttered. But the short answer is I think in some instances it probably crossed the line into unprotected speech to where you can be fired. And the great majority of them, it probably didn't. And my guess is those professors will probably have a guy who looks somewhat like me, who brings a lawsuit somewhat like I did for Professor Grossenbach, and the university's probably going to have to pay. I mean, that's just the way it works.
Yeah.
And they should if they violated the law. If somebody was espousing a viewpoint, just because I don't like it, I didn't like what a lot of those professors had to say, but I guarantee you the First Amendment protected a lot of it. That doesn't make it ethical. That doesn't make it right. But they had the right to say it. If you didn't like Charlie Kirk, that's fine. There's a whole lot of professors out there I don't like, and they're espousing nonsense all over the place. But they have the right to say it, and let's put it in the marketplace of ideas. Let's have a healthy exchange. That's what America's premised on. We don't fire people because we don't like what they had to say.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Thank you both for all of your insight, for sharing your story, for standing up for free speech for all professors and government employees. Like I said, we will be keeping up with this lawsuit and continuing to let our readers know what's going on. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Gabrielle Tamont with The College Fix. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment down below, and stay tuned for more.